mean, the story, and I guess it reflects on us as cheap bastards, is that we started podcamp because we were all the good podcasting conferences, like Podcast Academy, Podcast Hotel, Portable Media Expo, we're all on the West Coast. And we're like, I don't really want to spend $3,000 just for a hobby and stuff. So we said, okay, let's do one. We have no idea what we're doing. Kind of still don't.
It really, that was the thing. So 5 years ago, my trajectory was I had gone to this Podcast Academy. I thought it was okay, but I had this sort of feeling like, holy crap, you have to spend thousands of bucks if you want to get into this, and there's no way I'm going to convince the home unit that that's going to happen. Because I'm one of those hobby collectors. Does anyone do that? You get really into something, you spend a couple grand on it, and then you don't ever do that. So you buy the awesome bike and the cool, camera that you never use, that thing. And then we went to bar camp, and at bar camp we ran into people that were the guy. I know more about the JavaScript than anyone would ever know. I wrote the kernel. I'm like, goody. And then I saw that he was a media making nerd, and I was an idiot, and I was like trying to mic a speaker, and he told me why that was stupid, and so we made friends, and so we decided we'll have this event, and seriously, there were a few thousand emails back and forth, like, crap, they asked, what do we get if you sponsor, and things like that, and that's how it started.
Yeah. Actually, I see Adam Weiss is in the back there. Is Sue Scout here yet? No? Steve Garfield here yet? Okay, no. So Adam and Susan and Steve were also part of the original organizing team. We were all basically just kind of going, we've never run any kind of event, larger than dinner at someone's house and stuff. So we completely winged it. We expected 50 people to show up. We got 300. Bad planning.
Yeah, we're idiots. But we, the other thing that was, the takeaway from that, by the way, is that there was no podcamp before, and then there was, and there's been 115 or something like that all over the world.
Every continent except Antarctica.
Can't get anyone to go there.
That's true.
Cape Town, South Africa, Perth, Australia,
Singapore,
Toronto, Singapore,
Stockholm,
Sweden. That was fun. And anybody can run one, and that's the thing. And you could run another one. I mean, there's been the Western Mass one, right, Morris?
Whoa.
So. They're anywhere, and I think one of the times we had this really great conversation was, the whole premise was this DNA of disruption idea, this idea that what we learned is that we didn't have what we wanted, so we just made one, and that you could do that too, and you can do it for whatever you're into. We tend to think that all these things that were around were always around. We tend to think like, the NFL was in the Constitution somewhere. Turns out it wasn't. I looked.
I mean, the other thing on that is, we kind of succeeded. Yeah, and I apologize if Michael Hagen or anyone else is listening. We kind of actually did disrupt too well. We killed every other podcasting conference there ever was. I don't think there are anymore.
Not
It
really.
is Blog World now.
Did Blog World actually, they stopped putting the word podcasting in?
Yeah, it's gone. It's just now Blog World. But yeah, it's interesting. We did with this 115, and this was literally just something we thought of because we had nothing better. So, kind of what we wanted to talk about today, and the way to sort of kick this off, is the idea of preparing for the future. We are living in an extremely disruptive time. Two guys who have no clue what they're doing can basically wreck an entire industry. Sorry, but it's not limited to people who seem to be special. I mean, when we started podcamp, I was selling student loans to people. You were
a wireless
guy.
I was hidden in the back of a data center, climbing under floorboards, and using 10-year-old technology to make my own blogs and wikis that the security guys couldn't find.
So there's nothing, like you said, there's nothing that said, podcamp was ordained to become, this worldwide phenomenon. So, which also means that every single one of you has that same ability. You have, if you're willing to step outside of the box that you put yourself in, which like we did, you can do it. Some really, really amazing things, and with literally almost no money, no idea what you're doing, no support. You just have to be doing something that's completely different than what everything that's been there before. We're living in an interesting time because right now, if you look at what's happening, you have sort of how old media, and they are really desperately trying to figure out how to stay in business, and you have new media which has all the buzz, the excitement, and no idea how to make money at all. No idea how to be self-sustaining, no idea how to do anything but talk a lot, which is good. That's basically what old media did. They just sold it. And so, what we want to talk about is how do you actually start preparing for this? Because this transition to new media, old media will still be there. I mean, we still have the theater, and that was, what, 700 years old now, 800 years old? Actually, it's probably more than that, because technically ancient Greece and Rome, thousands of years old, right? We still have televisions. We still have a printing press. Gutenberg is not defunct by any means. You wrote a book, several books, so, and Gutenberg's invention's working for you.
To and change. The other thing too, and to the point of preparing and all that, the one thing that they didn't have in the old media that we have really intensely is a network of people who really care, and we built those networks. And the fun thing about being one of the first podcamps was that all those people who were there kind of went on and did really cool things. There's hardly anybody who didn't go on and find some kind of neat new opportunity that didn't also participate in that feeling that we had at the first ever podcamp, which was that networks mattered, and that connecting to people mattered, and that when you found a relationship and you built it and you nurtured it, and when you actually put love back into the relationships and use love however you want, boy, there's a value. I mean, we have people that have been friends and sponsors and relationships for ever since we started, and it never ends, and the opportunities just keep rolling back onto each other. So don't take it lightly. By the way, everyone here, a good chunk of you are shy. I just want to point that out. FYI, you're all shy. So if the person next to you is making that kind of mean face, that's because they're shy too. And that's the accidental face you make when you're shy. And the other one is, one of you is going to give. You've got to say something. It doesn't matter. Maybe don't start with bodily functions, but otherwise just open up. It's okay. I mean, you really. And I know, and I feel like a dick when I say that, because it's not like you can just not be shy, but you're all shy. It's okay, except for me. It's okay, and just connect, get to know each other, because the people in the room are smarter than us. That's why we did podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the audience is always smarter than the stage. That's always the point.
Circling back to podcasting for a sec, we were discussing this last night actually. Podcasting was about 5 years too early. The revolution of podcasting was 5 years too early. All those companies, I mean, we were looking at the sponsor list for Podcamp Boston 1. Almost all the podcasting companies are gone. Almost, I would say, 2/3 of the shows are gone, at least, and stuff. But here's the funny thing, going back to podcasting, how many people have a phone? A mobile phone with sort of a smartphone? And keep your hands up, keep your hands up. How many people have an iPad or another device? How many people have, okay, that's pretty much the entire room. These are all podcasting devices, all podcast listening devices. You have more people now than ever before in the history of humanity who can tune into this stuff, and nobody's doing it at all.
You know what I just thought of? When we were at PodCamp Sweden in Europe, one of the things that people said were like, yeah, over here we all listen to podcast things on our phone. And we were like, what? Because in the States it was all about your iPod, and this
well, they had no wireless network. Now we do. We have 3G.
That's right.
5 years later.
Everyone said, oh yeah, we all listen to podcasts on our phone, and we just thought that was crazy. Duh.
So, the PodCamp started as a podcasting conference. It has changed, obviously, with times to adapt to all the new media that's out there. But I think it's a good opportunity. It's certainly a good year to think about looking at the medium again. Edison Research, some friends of ours, did a really interesting study and said that podcast audience growth has been going about 28% year over year for the last 5 years, very quietly, because it's not sexy anymore. It's not the shiny new object. Everyone's attention span went down to 140 characters. But there's still 18 to 22 minutes every day when you're in your car, when the alternative is, Glenn Beck or Rush Limbaugh, whoever, or NPR and Car Talk. There is you, all of you, who have microphones now, more gear than ever. You've got laptops and netbooks and iPhone 4s that can record HD. You can do this stuff now easier than ever. I mean, it really is easier than ever. So, as part of PodCamp, if you haven't thought about it, take a look at the idea of podcasting again, because I think you might be very surprised at just how large the audience very quietly has grown.
How weird that we have to bring up, you should try podcasting. But it's true.
Yeah.
Because at the first ever PodCamp, it was like, what's your podcast? What's your podcast? If you didn't have a podcast, you totally lied. It's,
I'm working on it.
Citizen Echo Drive, that's my podcast.
It's true. I mean, the other thing then, this is something you had mentioned a lot, is the idea that because it's such a disruptive time, the things that you've come to associate with as being stable, in fact, are very, very not stable. Anyone who's been laid off recently obviously knows this very, very well. Looking for work.
Yeah, so, I mean, we're at a time where the average national unemployment is 9.9%. It's a little lower, it's 9.8, and we're like cheering, woo, 0.1 less. Detroit is 20-something. Most people there lost, the auto industry lost workers, and then for every job GM cuts, 10 more jobs go away. So that's crazy. NPR, the local WBUR, did a thing on Route 9 this whole week, and if you heard any little bit about it, they were stopping in all these various mill towns and all that, and just talking about all the manufacturing that's gone, and all these things that are gone. To this I add that I went down to Birmingham, Alabama, 100-year-old city that popped up out of nowhere, very like Pittsburgh, in demeanor and culture and what happened to them. There was a steel town that showed up out of nowhere. One day there was a guy in the mountains, he found a rock, he went, holy crap, this is iron, and there was an iron industry. And they became sort of the Pittsburgh to the south, although they hate hearing that. And then it all went away because we don't make steel here in America anymore, it turns out. And so they were another culture just like ours here with the mill towns, where they didn't really know what to do anymore. And so I got the really neat opportunity of sitting at one table with a whole bunch of bloggers one night, and then the next day sitting at a table with the people who did like economic development, who did real stuff, and who, like the woman whose husband brought like 3,000 auto manufacturing jobs to Alabama, and who's bringing bamboo forestry. Evidently, you can grow a bamboo tree in 5 years, and it'll be 100 feet tall and 10 inches across. 5 years, they can turn over the forest over and over again. And so this is how she's thinking. This is what she's working on. Thousands of jobs at a time, millions and millions of dollars. Because, by the way, when you bring all those auto manufacturers, they need power. The power costs money. The power company makes money. There's taxes all around. Hooray! We all spend it. So on one side, I've got all these bloggers who could promote the hell out of anything and are talking about their sandwich. And on this side, I have these people who are ridiculously brilliant and wealthy that have no sense of how to talk or communicate or build a relationship if it hurt them, And I just kept, it was like looking at great white sharks and meat and not realizing. So I think that one of the things to do is we forgot how to look for work. We started realizing that jobs, we thought that was what work was, but job is a unit of measurement. Job is a predefined, prepackaged thing of work. Job is like the Lunchables of work, right? So, tweetable. Jobs are the Lunchables of work. And the reason I say that is because work used to mean I know something, I have some capability, I have some skill, I can deliver this to these people who need this skill, and I will derive some value from that. And jobs just became sort of the lazy man's work, because you just show up to wherever there was a job and, oh, I know how to do that, and you get a queue with a bunch of other people. Well, guess what? Everyone's looking for those jobs because they're the only thing with a beacon out. No one's looking for work because there is no beacon. It's not out there. It's picks and shovels time, kids. We can all go out and make stuff happen.